We have passed the point of no return. 51% of the population is now out of work, and voting for more government support has become their only means of survival. Benefits often pay as much as working, making the working class wonder why they are holding the burden. The government has methodically strangled the working class until we became a dwindling minority without a strong voice. Now the majority votes to take more from the struggling working class. As long as politicians promise to plunder the working class to feed their loyal voters, our voices remain buried in a hollowed-out democracy. Solving these problems would remove the chains that keep voters dependent and hungry, so the government has no incentive to solve the problems. Our government intentionally ran the country into massive debt using oil reserves as collateral. Now 95% of our taxes go toward bank interest payments, drying up social services and leaving our children with a debt that we will never pay off. It was all a deliberate scheme to make Canadian people slaves to the banks, with the only beneficiaries being the banks that lent to the government. People were convinced the Red Party would tax the rich, which it did for show, as it found other ways to benefit them, leaving the burden still on the working class. Every tax dollar surrendered only fertilized our own ruin. When exhausted workers ask for even a slight loosening of the tax noose, we are painted as villains by those who have never worked and only demand more. We are now treated like haters or bigots simply for wanting lower taxes or refusing to pay for the failed policies. Drugs were a central part of the scheme. It is now easier to get drugs than a cup of coffee. Government money flowed into addiction instead of real help, increasing poverty and homelessness while reducing accountability. The streets are covered with homeless encampments like open sores across a decaying body. People turned to drugs because the working class was being trampled, paying for everything and getting nothing in return. People parade their fake empathy as a way of demanding more. If their compassion were real, they would see the average working person's soul being slowly crushed and would care about the beaten-up working class instead of enslaving us further with one policy after another. We are accused of despising the homeless, hating the environment, bigotry, and everything else simply because we reject this theatrical compassion. Our government has shifted from an enjoyable democracy into a hellscape, quietly taking away our freedom, wealth, and hope. The biggest victory was diminishing the working class to a minority while subsidizing the news until it became pure propaganda. So long as politicians promise to take more from us and give more to their voters, we no longer have a real voice in what was once a democracy. Freedom has been bled out slowly rather than taken with fanfare. Rising costs, rising taxes, and ever-tightening regulations have become a silent strangulation for small businesses. Owners were already too broken and bruised to fight through the labyrinth of government paperwork for promised subsidies. Meanwhile, colossal corporations kept legions of lawyers and fixers to suck every last drop from the government teat. The government prioritized the destruction of the small businesses because the voters would care less if larger corporations were nationalized. The food chain is now tightly regulated and controlled by the government. Officials take their cut first, skimming the best portions before passing on the expected leftovers to the public. After farming all day or grinding through exhausting 12-hour shifts, even the farmers themselves are forced to stand in long lines at food banks for hours, dependent on government handouts from the very harvest they produced. The farmers aren't thanked for their hard work, but the government is thanked in votes for giving the fruits of their labor away. Not showing appreciation for the government is an offense. There aren't many people enjoying the outdoors. Laughably weak sentences that release rapists, terrorists, and violent predators back onto the streets like recurring nightmares. Every news report about a violent crime mentions that the perpetrator was just released a couple days before reoffending. They knew the public wouldn't want more government policing and surveillance, so they used fear. Now we are in so much fear, we beg to have a camera on every street corner. Soon, they will crush down on crime, and people will rejoice. But they won. They took away any freedom of privacy. We once begged for help and voted for vast social services, believing it would cost only a few extra drops of taxes. Our healthcare system has collapsed with little money to go into it and the increasing demand. The widening abyss between the blood money we need to survive and the crumbling scraps of service we are mockingly offered has turned daily life into a decaying hellscape.